At the edge of the familiar, where your comfort zone ends and the unknown stretches before you, that's where greatness awaits. Are you ready to take that leap? This is the Risk Big podcast with your host, Travis Fitzwater.
Thanks for listening to the Risk Big podcast, Stories of Starts with Travis Fitzwater. Find episodes online with show notes at www.riskbigpodcast.com/episodes. Also, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter by following @RiskBigPodcast. Glad to have Billy Hurley III with me today for my podcast. Really kind of thrilled. Took a flyer and sent a note to his assistant, and they were very gracious to, at the beginning of his new year and the new season, to jump on. He's a PGA Tour professional golfer. I've met him a couple times, really kind of impressed with his demeanor, the way he handles himself, not to mention the service he's provided to our country as a veteran in the United States military, the only veteran that is currently playing in the PGA Tour that I'm aware of, and served in the Navy for 5 years after going to the Naval Academy, was a renowned golfer in college and high school, and fulfilled his duty to the country by serving in the military for 5 years after graduating from the Naval Academy in Annapolis, and then grinded his way onto the tour. And kind of want to dive into that here in a moment. But Billy, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Travis, good to be with you.
So tell us a little bit the story about, I know that you dreamed early on about being a golfer. So this is kind of, and you and your dad played golf often when you were younger and throughout your life. But tell me a little bit about the story about how you became the golfer, how you got through military, and then, jumped on some of these mini tours and grinded out a PGA Tour card.
Well, as an 18-year-old, high school golfer, I think every kid dreams of playing on the PGA Tour. I mean, that's what golf is when you're an 18-year-old high school golfer and playing some junior tournaments and competing well at those. But you really have no idea what that means, and there's very few people who are good enough at 18 years old to even really have that be a realistic thought, right? I mean, there's a couple of guys, Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler, come to mind as guys who made that transition at a really young age. But so for most of it, it's no more than a dream, and it certainly was for me. I was I was a good high school golfer. I finished third in the state of Virginia my senior year, but I wasn't a national level recruit. I didn't have schools like Oklahoma State or Florida or Georgia or the kind of the golf powerhouse schools. I didn't have any of them knocking on my door, and that probably had a little bit to do with the fact that I was pretty much declared going to the Naval Academy ever since my sophomore or junior year of high school. So even if there was anybody interested, they kind of recognized they were wasting their time because I was dead set on going to the Naval Academy. So, that's not really the golf powerhouse of the world, but it is a much different route kind of to the PGA Tour. And there's really no guarantees for anything ever, especially in golf, and how year to year it kind of is. There's no guaranteed contracts. There's no, multi-year deals, so to speak, as there are in other sports. So it's always kind of a year to year kind of gig. And, but going to the Naval Academy, that was just me. I fell in love with the Naval Academy. I fell in love with everything about it. And then I really actually credit that decision with a lot of who I became as a golfer, because going to that school, I played right away. I was in the starting lineup from day one, my freshman year, and not a lot of freshmen do that at the Naval Academy, and I was pretty fortunate to kind of have my game come back after the plebe summer boot camp thing. Lots of times it takes guys a year to have your game come back after the intense kind of boot camp plebe summer thing.
Man, I can only imagine.
And so I felt fortunate that the game. Yeah, no, I mean, guys' bodies change.
Sure.
I'm not a big guy, but I probably lost 8 pounds that summer. And with not necessarily 8 pounds to lose at that point in my life.
Yeah, no kidding.
and so, it just it definitely can change a lot of things. And then you throw in the stress of plebe year at the Naval Academy. And for me, golf was my escape. Lots of my teammates had trouble, putting aside, the calculus test they had tomorrow or the chemistry quiz that was coming up or whatever when they came to golf practice. For whatever reason, for me, it was my escape. So I didn't have a problem putting that aside. I rather relished the opportunity to put it aside and play golf. And so, having that extra experience of playing from the get-go, I think I could have gone to a Virginia, University of Virginia or Virginia Tech or somewhere kind of in the Virginia area, University of Maryland. And I could have been on the team, and then I could have probably played my junior year.
Sure.
Maybe some in my sophomore year or whatever. But going to the Naval Academy, I got, 2 years more of competitive golf experience, which I think actually definitely helped me mature as a player coming
Sure.
out of college as well.
And then you you did really well, obviously, at the Naval Academy golfing. And then you had 5 years of service that you obviously honorably served. You became a lieutenant. This became your job for 5 years, within the back
Absolutely.
of your mind, like having a dream to be on the PGA Tour. So how did when you did your 5 years and then you left, what did that, because that's a huge risk, right? Like you left, you don't have a tour card. You're not coming out of the Navy having played a ton because you're working all over the world.
Right. Right.
What does that look like when you leave the Navy and have served dutifully, but you haven't had the time? I mean, you're not on a golf course all over the world. You're working your tail
Right.
off.
No, I mean, actually, the last 5 months I was in the Navy, I was deployed. So I played one time in the last 5 months that I was in the Navy, essentially, and then got out of the Navy and went to professional golf full time. And it was not really the jump that the transition.
Yeah, no kidding.
period
It's
there
like that's the thing
was,
that's it's so unique. It's so unique how you made that jump from doing what you're doing to all of a sudden you're going on these mini tours. And I hope you talk about that a little bit, but the grind that has to be from 2009 to 2011, 12, when you finally get your tour card.
Yeah. It was really interesting. When you approached me about this podcast and kind of the idea of like risky starts and that kind of thing. And I guess I never viewed it as a risk. Looking back at it, it totally was. It totally is.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that in the middle of it, like I never viewed it as a risk. I think I viewed it more of like this is something I owe to myself. Like this is something I'm going to try. I'm going to throw myself 110% at, and we're going to see where it goes. And now there were no guarantees, like you said. So it was risky in that sense.
Sure.
At the same time, I didn't just roll out of bed one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to do this." Right?
Yeah.
I had been preparing to do this for 5 years. And pretty much when I graduated from the Naval Academy, I knew that the end game was 5 years and then try the golf thing, because I knew that I wanted to give myself that shot. And I think that there's a couple things that stick out as I think about that. And oftentimes in the military, we talk about transition and transitioning out of the military and that kind of thing, and how to do that better and whatnot. And for me, like I said, it wasn't one day I rolled out of bed. There was a progression. There was, a timeline that I was able to work through. And while I wasn't working on golf during those 5 years of active duty, there were spurts where I got to play a lot, and there were spurts where I played little to none. But I kind of knew, this date on the calendar, 5
Sure.
years from now 3 years from now, 18 months from now, 2 months from now, like golf is coming. I'm going to do that. So my wife and I did intentional things to prepare for that, specifically, obviously financially being the biggest hurdle. But so we looked at that, and it wasn't a, wake up one day and quit your job kind of thing, right? I mean, there was a progression to it, even though then there were things we did along the way, even though they weren't specific to getting the ball in the hole faster, right?
Sure.
And that's kind of what we joke about in
Sure.
golf is, well, hit it less times, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant idea.
So it's
So
yeah. So it's fascinating that you say that because, I just named this thing. It seemed like a logical thing and I got a web address for it. And it was like outside looking in, it looks like folks are taking significant risks to do what they love. And it makes a lot of sense. But everybody I've interviewed, and you're the 8th or 9th that I've interviewed thus far, it's not risks necessarily. I mean, it's outside the world. It looks very risky, but to the folks that have started what they're passionate about, it's basically at the heart of it. They're just saying it's not risky for me to do what I love because I know that if I work hard enough at it, I'll have opportunities for myself. And I love that you kind of delineated that because I know that my podcast name is a specific thing, but everybody I've talked to, it's obviously risky what they're doing, but they know in their heart of hearts that they're doing what they love, and they, the result of that may not be monetary success necessarily, but it does come in purposeful living and some real opportunities in that way.
absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that it is, I think you're exactly right. Outside looking in, and even like I said, when you first contacted me about it, I kind of had to take a step back. Well, it's not risky. Well, no, I mean, I guess it really was. Like outside looking in, yeah, it really was a big risk. But I guess I never looked at it that way. I got a really good piece of advice before I left the Navy, and I had done everything in the last kind of year that I was in the Navy to be competitive as if I were staying in the Navy. And I had kind of, gotten some advanced qualifications that I really didn't need because I'm getting out of the Navy and whatever, but I kind of was setting it up so that I would at least have a way back in the Navy if it was, 2 or 3 years down the road and
Sure.
golf didn't work out, and I was having some conversations with, the senior leadership on the ship, specifically the executive officer, who's the number 2 guy. And I was kind of asking him, how would this look like? How would this specific piece affect me if I were trying to get back in, and yada, yada, yada. And he was kind of like, Billy, that won't affect you at all. If you want to get back in, like we'll get you back in. Like that's not a problem.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, okay, great. And then, maybe 3 days later after I had this conversation with the XO, I poked my head into the commanding officer's office, for something that I needed him to sign or whatever. And we did our business, and they said, hey, Billy, I want to talk to you about something. I heard you were talking to the XO about getting back in the Navy. And I said, well, yes, sir. I just want to, make sure that door is still open and, I can do, if that's something that I can do. And he kind of cut me off in the mid-sentence, and he said, Billy, I don't want to ever hear you talk like that again. And it took me by surprise for a second. I was like, what are you talking about, sir? In my head. And he said, look, I'd love to have you in the Navy. You're a fantastic officer, and we'd love to have people like you in the Navy. But where you're going and what you're going to do and who you're going to compete against, there is no plan B. You can't have a plan B. You have to be 100% diving headfirst into this and without a fallback plan. And so that was kind of shook me for a second, but I realized that's really good advice. And it was really for my CO, who played golf twice a year kind of guy. It really stuck with me, and that his foresight for me as a young man was really helpful as I took that leap into professional golf.
Sure, and that it's kind of this analogy of, and no pun intended, but burning the ships when you get somewhere, and your survival is is based on your ability to make it work on your end without a fallback that you can kind of rest on your laurels a little bit. It kind of forces you. That's a great thought. So when you start this journey in 2009, you're going into mini tours. Can you talk about just really quickly how you got through the mini tours, what that looks like in reality, and then getting your tour card a couple years after that?
Yeah, so I mean, 2009, I got out of the Navy and just threw myself headfirst into golf, playing, practicing every day, and then August kind of rolls around and it's time to sign up for Q school, and it was one of those deals where it's like, Q school, I'm not really going to be ready for Q school. I don't feel like, it starts in September, and I've been out of the Navy for 2 months. And,
Sure.
And so I got but I felt like, well, I gotta go. I gotta do it, and so then I signed up for some tournaments because I realized, well, I got to play a tournament before Q school comes, and I can't have that be the first competitive tournament back. So, started with some mini tours there, and it was hard. I missed 3 mini tour cuts by 1 shot each there in the summer of 2009, and I, just it was tough. I mean, it took a lot to kind of get back into golf full time, and so then I went to Q school, and I got the second stage of Q school, but I didn't get past second stage, and you kind of have to get into the third stage to have some status on the PGA Tour or the Web.com Tour. So then it was just mini tours again for 2010, and I mean, mini tours is a grind, and all golf is a grind, and there's the thing about golf is that the numbers for professional golfers don't work. Like, there's 435 guys who put on an NBA uniform. There's 630 guys who put on a Major League Baseball uniform. There's 1,600 guys who put on an NFL uniform. And there's 144 golfers who are going to play next week at the Sony Open.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So, the mini tours and the Web.com Tour, I mean, these are places where like really good golfers are. There's just not enough space on the PGA Tour. I mean, if we had many spots at the NFL, mini tours would all be playing at the highest level. All the guys doing that. So it's really the numbers game is tough. So mini tours are where a lot of people, most people start, and mini tours are nothing more than professional gambling at the end of the day. Everybody brings $1,000, and the winner leaves with more of it than the guy who finishes 30th. It really is. There's organizations that host them and put them on, and and there's very little sponsorship money involved, and so it's just professional gambling, and so that's a unique way to do it, right? I mean, here's $1,000. Now I'm going to play golf and hopefully make more than $1,000 this week. Sure. Right. So, on top of expenses and travel and all that kind of stuff, even notwithstanding that. So, but again, it's just kind of, that's where you go, and that's where you start at the bottom, in really anything that you're going to start up, you're going to start at the bottom and kind of work your way out of the basement. And so that's kind of how it works in golf. And then, I did that in 2010, and kind of March 2010, I won a mini tour event, and that's where I first kind of got some traction. And it was, January and February were pretty low for me because I've been out of the Navy 6 months. I kind of thought it would be about a 6-month process to get being a full golfer, and I was still missing cuts. And then I won. I don't even know. I'm assuming I had made a cut before then on some tournament and finished 40th or something, but I don't remember. And but I remember, March of 2010, I won, my first golf tournament back from the Navy, and like I said, that's when I got some traction and kind of was able to continue to get better and push through, and that certainly relieved a bit of a financial burden at the time.
I can imagine.
With that win and that kind of stuff. So but it was still, then I got through Q school in 2010, but I didn't make it to the PGA Tour. I made it to really the bottom of the barrel of what's now the Web.com Tour. I didn't even get good status on the Web.com Tour out of that Q school in 2010. So 2011, I started at the bottom of the barrel of the Web.com Tour, and was fortunate enough to kind of play well enough early when I got the chance to snowball that into a full season, and snowball that into then ultimately getting a PGA Tour card for my rookie year in 2012.
Yeah, and it was actually kind of, we have some mutual friends, and it was kind of fun to follow the progress because as you were, I can only imagine how stressed you were, but to kind of watch from their perspective as they were kind of sending notes, hey, think about Billy this weekend, or watch, or whatever, as he's he's trying to get this tour card, which is really obviously, to be a golfer, get a tour card, it's a huge deal. It was really kind of fun to follow that portion of your life. Let me ask you, this is a follow-up. So you're on the tour and you have this whole line of experience with building up a resume in your golf career. Do you have like a favorite failure of yours that really kind of stands out, or a failure that sets you up for later success that you could look at and say, yeah, I'm glad I failed there because it built this in me?
So I think I remember a specific point kind of back in that January 2010 time frame when I had been out of the Navy for 6 months, like I said, and I remember I missed a cut by a shot, and I really missed a cut by like one person because it ended up being tied for 71st versus tied for 70th would have made the cut, and I hadn't made a cut, and I hadn't really gotten any traction on it, and I was pretty frustrated. And I was pretty down and kind of that way. And I remember, like, literally I was driving up 95. The tournament that I just missed the cut in was outside Jacksonville, Florida, and I was driving home up 95. And I was talking to my dad and just telling him how frustrated I was, and it doesn't feel like it's coming back, and it doesn't feel like it's it's going to come back, or whatever, golf as a whole. And he just said to me, hey, you've been doing this for 6 months. Most guys never took time off. Like, the guys you're playing against have never taken time off of golf. So, kind of cut yourself some slack. I think you're actually making decent progress, and put it all in perspective, and let's just keep going forward. And that was really a pivotal conversation where I was able to, give myself some, I don't know, grace or slack, or just allow myself the ability to not be perfect yet, and push forward.
Yeah. And that kind of dovetails into this thought, like, how do you deal with adversity while you're playing? Because golf is 72 holes. It's just mental, right? The whole time. It's I can't even imagine the mentality
it sure is, yeah.
You have to deal with. How do you deal with adversity when you're on the golf course and you're like, I can't make a shot? I mean, I do every time I play. This is like my mentality, like for 18 holes. It's shanking left and right. Am I ever going to get done with this round? So how do you deal with adversity in the golf course for you?
Well, I think it really comes back to knowing myself and having a good view of not only a healthy view of myself, but a realistic view of myself, and knowing my strengths and weaknesses. Because there are times when you certainly get out there and it feels like I'm shanking it all over the place. I mean, that's obviously a relative term based on the skills of golf, but that's what it feels like to me, and so the thing that I have to be careful of is to know myself, know what I'm good at, and to stick to that. And specifically in the mental side of things, like, I have, through mental coaching and counseling and therapy and all that stuff, learned a lot. And, one of the things I've learned is that I am a thinker. I do my best. I'm by Myers-Briggs, really, by personality type, I am a thinker. And so when I get into the stressful situations on the golf course, I tend to become a feeler, and I feel like this and I feel like that, and I feel like I can't make a shot at all. And that's when that gets destructive, because I'm not any good at being a feeler. I'm good at being a thinker. And so I have to make sure to remind myself to be a thinker and to still think well, and not throw away shots where I don't have to. You're going to make mistakes over the course of a 72-hole golf tournament, but I can't tell you the number of times where you get behind the eight ball a little bit early in the round, you make a dumb mistake and throw away another shot, and then you birdie 3 of the last 4 to shoot even par. And you go and you look back and go, man, if I just wasn't a bonehead on 9, 10, and 11 because I was frustrated, then I would have shot 2 under par, and I'd be right in the middle of this tournament. Instead, I'm even par, and I'm kind of clawing my way to, get back in the tournament. So just for me, it's that knowing myself, knowing what I'm good at, from both a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint, to kind of stay in there when things aren't going as well as I want them to.
Yeah, and that's excellent advice across the board. I think you could probably apply that pretty well anywhere. And it brings me to this quote that you had actually after the Quicken Loans National, your first tournament you won on the PGA Tour at Quicken Loans National at Congressional, there around where you live, your home course, kind of a neat story in and of itself. But you were being interviewed, and you kind of made a somewhat of a joke. The journalist asked you a question, and your response was, "The game of golf does nothing but beat you up and make you want to stop going." It kind of tongue in cheek, because you'd had at that point you were kind of struggling through a number of things, personal issues with the tragedy with your dad, and then also kind of feeling like you were at the end of your rope on having enough strength to move on in golf. It was kind of a tongue in cheek joke. But at the same time, kind of as a thought, as people are taking these risks, and I'm trying to encourage people to do what they're passionate about, it's easy to get to this point where you're thinking that truly that I may be passionate about this, but I'm ready to quit because I'm hitting all of these walls. I'm hitting some real frustrations. How do you get past that for yourself?
Well, in golf, it's really hard, because
I can only imagine.
I've played somewhere around, I'm guessing, 150 tournaments on the PGA Tour, and I've won one.
Yeah.
So it's not a great percentage. If you do the percentage math there, it's not good. But that's maybe one of the more frustrating things about golf is that, I mean, even Tiger Woods didn't win 50% of the time. I don't know what it is, probably 20 or something like that, which is in golf amazing.
Yeah,
to win 20% of the time. Right. And so, golf does beat you up, and I'm sure that's not, singularly true to just golf, and that there's many industries where, you experience more failures than you experience successes. But, I think that there's little things in golf that you have to remember to take the successes when they are, you have to remember to, that a top 10 is good, and that maybe even just this week making the cut was good, because I wasn't feeling well and I didn't have my best stuff, but I made the cut and finished 45th, and that was a good week based on what I had when I got here on Tuesday or whatever. And so I think that it's all kind of, there's a bit of a relative scale, other weeks you might finish 4th and feel like you screwed up because you really had it all going and you made, and something didn't go your way on the last night on Sunday or whatever. And so I think that having that relative scale of success, and I remember early in my career, my father-in-law talking to me about redefining success. Because if you define success as just wins and losses, then it's kind of not going to go your way. So redefining what is success, and so lots of times in golf we talk about, if I did everything right mentally and everything, I thought clearly and put it all out there, then that was successful, even if the physical shot wasn't what I wanted it to be. That's kind of oftentimes one of the things that we go to and talk more about, being successfully mentally and controlling the things that we can control. That can kind of help as well as you go through. And I think that's a really good mantra for anybody starting anything, is control what you can control.
Yeah.
You can control, making the best sales pitch you can. You can't necessarily control the buyer saying yes or no, but you can maybe walk away from even a deal you didn't close saying, I feel good about that because I did everything that I could, and I did that to the best of my ability. Where, and that's similar to golf. I prepared what I wanted to do, and today I couldn't execute the shot properly physically, but I really did think through it properly, and so I controlled what I can control.
Sure. And so those are some terrific thoughts. I just think that the control what you can control is such a huge deal because it's so easy to get bogged down with what others are saying or what others are doing, and having to feel like you have to control other things that you just can't is a huge thought. And Billy, I know your time is precious, so let me ask you one more question, and this will really want to get your thoughts on this. But you had kind of this Quicken Loans National tournament that you won was kind of a huge story in the PGA Tour at the time because this is your home course. You tragically lost your father, around that time, and you're dealing with some emotions because your dad, I'm pretty sure did security even at Congressional at some times in his life before you played in that tournament. How did you deal with with all of that emotional stuff as you're seeing the success on this home course that you feel comfortable in? Obviously, it helped a lot that you felt comfortable at the course. How do you deal with that adversity while you were going through it at the time to really kind of come out on top and really kind of give yourself a breath of fresh air in your career?
Yeah, in one sense, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
There was a bit of that week that was a blur, but I do remember making a couple of conscious decisions, and it kind of goes back to. So there's two things. I made a couple of conscious decisions, and then I experienced a peace like I've never felt before, and I'll explain both of those for a quick second here. I made a couple of conscious decisions throughout the week to do what was best for me, not to do what people might like to see, not to do what, this would make a good story if I did this or whatever, and just silly things like carrying a certain head cover or a certain thing on my bag or whatever on Sunday. I made this conscious decision. It was like, that would be cool, but you know what? That wouldn't be best for me. What's best for me is to stick with what I always do and do it the same way. And so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to add that thing to my bag that people might think was cool. And it was specifically around my dad. And I was just like, that's not going to be best for me. And so I made that conscious decision to do what was best for me. And I think that kind of helped. And that in one sense that sounds selfish, right? But in another sense, it actually, the more that I've grown and whatever, doing things that are best for me enhance my ability to do things for other people.
Sure.
And so those are little things that might be, working out before my kids get up, that actually I know is best for me. And sometimes it stinks to get out of bed at 5:45 to go work out before they get up.
Yeah.
But that makes my day go better. So I'm kind of being selfish in one sense, but then that means I got to go to bed earlier the night before. And that, so there's a whole, back that out and you have to say no to other things when I'm doing what's necessarily what I think is best for me. And so then that makes me maybe the best version of myself, which makes me then more useful in the world. Right.
Sure.
and so that was definitely one thing that was specific, that week and that Sunday afternoon, really, before going out to the course to play the last round. And then, Travis, the other thing about that week, and I can't really explain it other than to say that it was a gift from God, that I had this peace that I nearly have never experienced before. And it just was this, I don't know. I mean, it certainly, when you hit the golf ball exactly where you're looking for a week, it certainly makes the round less stressful. But there was just this piece that really, cliche, this piece that passed understanding, and I can't explain it other than to say that it was a piece from God.
Yeah, and it's certainly having watched the tournament, remembering it, especially on Sunday when I tuned in because I knew you were in the lead, and it's just been fun to watch your career over the last couple of years. it was really neat to see, because you explained this a little bit in interviews afterwards, but you mentioned that some of this feels so transcendent. I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening in the moment, so like you make this chip in on 15, you're in the lead a little bit, but that gives you really a buffer going into the last three holes, right? And you even explained this afterwards where you don't even know how to respond. So you kind of do this like jumping fist pump thing. And it's because you're in this moment where, things are coming together like never before. It was really fascinating to watch and really, really kind of neat. And then the story behind it at the end, the emotion and all that came with it at your home course to win a tournament and being handed a trophy by Tiger Woods and all you've done for the military. I mean, it just feels like this is an incredible story. And really,
it was really storybook. I mean, in a lot of ways, and I mean, so it was just all kind of came together perfectly that Sunday afternoon. We're looking forward to trying to do it again, though.
Well, I look forward to seeing you do it again. I have loved following your career, and I appreciate the time you've given me today to talk to you about your story of your start and how you're doing what you love. And I'm sorry, I know I said one more question, but tell me really quick, if you had advice for somebody who wanted to start to do what they love, like what would you tell them just out the gate, just really quick, because I know you only have a minute or two here.
I think I would say that you owe it to yourself to give it a shot. But that doesn't mean that we recklessly go about it, right? So you owe it to yourself to kind of take the step of faith, to kind of chase your dream. But that also, you also owe it to yourself to have a plan, and there's a difference between, jumping off a bridge and knowing that there's a net there, or jumping off a bridge knowing that there's a plan, that you actually know how to swim when you dive into the pool, right? So I think that would be my advice. You owe it to yourself to give it a shot, but you owe it to yourself to also have a plan and not kind of recklessly jump into something.
Well, that's excellent. Billy, thank you so much for the time. I really, really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, hopefully.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
Thanks.
Fun being with you.
It's been great.